fact that we have extremely light winds, a lot of smoke out here, and that smoke actually falling back down on a lot of this area that's on fire and actually helping to smother that fire and put it out. But believe me, the firefighters, they've got a lot of work on their hands. This is in the Angeles Forest area right now. They have one helicopter from LA County Fire doing water drops, and they said there's 2 smaller helicopters out here with buckets dropping water as well. No containment numbers at this time. The flames moving away from homes. Mount Baldy, the Mount Baldy Fire Department, that is, actually tweeted a little while ago saying basically that there is no threat to the actual Mount Baldy area at this time for that fire. As I get a little bit wider, you can see those homes down there at the base of that foothill. It gives you an idea how far away up that hillside this fire is. Also, the fire department already saying that even if this fire did make a run, meaning making a quick move up the hillside, it has an area where it's going to be able to stop at, or they'll be able to have it stop, and they say 200 acres is a possibility, but right now it does seem like the flames are beginning to become less and less as the fire department making an aggressive attack out here. No number on containment. Live in Sky 9 over the San Antonio Heights area, I'm Stu Mandel. Back to you two in the studio.
Okay, thank you, Stu. A current president and a former president held dueling rallies today ahead of the key midterm elections.
You'd think Presidents Donald Trump and Barack Obama were on the ballot, judging from their attacks.
KCAL 9 political reporter Dave Bryan joins us now with more on their push for votes in the final stretch before Election Day.
That's right, and this is not exactly a friendly competition. There's more than a tinge of bitterness in this relationship. Both the Democrats and the Republicans rolling out the heavy political artillery with the control of Congress up for grabs in next Tuesday's election. And today, President Trump and his predecessor, President Obama, former President Obama, rallied supporters at 4 locations between them in the South and the Midwest, and the stakes couldn't be higher.
Again, thank you very much, West Virginia. Thank you.
The midterm election battle between Republican President Donald Trump and his Democratic predecessor, former President Barack Obama, ranged from West Virginia to Indiana and from Miami to Atlanta on Friday as both parties pull out all the stops to get their voters to the polls. In Atlanta Friday night, Obama campaigned for a Democratic candidate in a governor's race where President Trump's image hangs over the campaign, urging Democrats to do something about it.
So if you don't like what's going on right now, don't complain, don't get anxious, don't throw up your hands in despair, don't boo, don't hashtag. Vote.
Meanwhile, in Indiana, President Trump was urging his supporters to send a message to the Democrats next week.
This Tuesday, I need the people of Indiana to send a message to Chuck Schumer, Nancy Pelosi, Maxine Waters, and the radical Democrats, and we will make America great again.
Earlier, the president pounded home his signature issue, immigration, and the threat of an invasion on America by a migrant caravan, which is still weeks or even months from reaching the border, with primarily parents and their children.
Caravan after caravan is forming unvetted illegal aliens trying to flood into our country on your dollar.
In Miami, Mr. Obama blasted what he called President Trump's fear tactics and lies.
What we have not seen the way we're seeing right now is politicians just blatantly, repeatedly, boldly, shamelessly lying.
This week, the president has threatened to restrict asylum seekers on the southern border unilaterally, end birthright citizenship enshrined in the Constitution, and deploy up to 15,000 U.S. troops to the Mexican border. And at the Indiana rally, the Trump fear message is apparently hitting home with his supporters.
What is the most important issue for you this year when you go to vote?
Immigration.
Main thing is immigration.
The immigration is a big deal.
They all say, speak about the economy, speak about the economy.
Some Republicans don't think the president is talking enough about the economy. Just minutes after today's release of the monthly employment report show the economy adding 250,000 jobs in October with unemployment at a 49-year low, a senior aide to House Speaker Paul Ryan tweeted, "We're going to spend all day and weekend talking about the strong economy, right?" CBS contributor Dan Senor, who served in the George W. Bush administration, said focusing on the birthright citizenship issue could backfire.
And I think the biggest risk to the Republicans heading into these midterms is not the president's policy agenda, but is conveying chaos. And the way he's been handling some of the immigration issue reinforces chaos.
Now, both presidents will continue their rallies over the weekend. President Trump scheduled to hold campaign events in Georgia and Florida. Those are the same states where President Obama held rallies today. Mr. Obama headlined 4 events in late October before today's doubleheader. Juan, Crystal, back to you.
All right, Dave, thank you. Around 7,000 people are headed north in that caravan that Dave talked about, and have now reached Oaxaca in southern Mexico.
Most say they're fleeing violence and poverty in Central America. Correspondent Will Grant is traveling with them.
In the desperation to cross Mexico as fast as possible, even the most dangerous of lifts will do. On this trip, a helping hand can cut the migrants' journey time by hours. For decades, one of Honduras's main exports has been coffee. Now, it seems, it's coffee farmers.
Our crops had a disease called leaf rust. It meant they wouldn't mature, even at harvest. So we lost our entire livelihood.
No one here has money. 66% of Hondurans live in poverty, but the rural poor maybe have least of all. Jose Maria didn't even let his family know he was leaving, for fear they might talk him out of it. Now he's struggling to reach them to tell them he's okay.
When the coffee harvest was ruined, there was no money, no work, nothing. If there's regular work, we could try to stay, but right now we just don't have enough to live on. I even had to pull my daughters out of school because I can't afford for them to study.
Not everyone is leaving over failing crops and poor harvests, though. Others are fleeing for their lives. We've seen Samuel's family at almost every stop. They keep dragging their daughter north, insisting life in Honduras would amount to a death sentence after Samuel refused to join a gang.
Ask the migrants why they left Central America, and most will cite either extreme violence or extreme poverty, especially those involved in Honduras's decimated coffee production. Ask them why now, and many will say they simply grabbed the opportunity when it presented itself.
3 weeks ago, the group set off from Honduras amid a wave of optimism. The caravan's supporters claim it was a spontaneous exodus. The Trump administration says it was organized, paid for by everyone from the Democrats to Venezuela to George Soros. In reality, there are politics at play here, both from Honduras and the US midterm elections. Most of the migrants, though, are just caught in the middle. Will Grant, BBC News, Oaxaca, Mexico.
Hundreds of people in Toronto took to the streets tonight to protest former top White House advisor Steve Bannon.
No hate, no fear. Fascists are not welcome here. No hate.
Bannon was there for a debate about the rise of populism. The demonstration delayed the start of the debate, but it still went on. Protest organizers say giving Bannon a platform to express extreme views could encourage violence. At least 3 people were arrested during the demonstration.
And some critics call a tweet by President Donald Trump one of the most racially charged political ads in years. The controversy has dragged in former Sheriff Joe Arpaio, who was the first person pardoned by President Trump. Correspondent Tom Foreman has a fact check on the controversial ad.
Using an actual court appearance by convicted cop killer Luis Bracamontes, the video gets this right. The Mexican man who entered the United States illegally did say he'd like to kill more police officers. But then it goes factually off the rails with 2 big claims. Democrats let him in, and Democrats let him stay. Both are misleading at best, at worst, flat out false. Here's why. Records indicate Bracamontes entered the U.S. illegally and was deported more than once before those murders. True, an immigration and customs official told CNN it occurred under Democrat Bill Clinton in 1997. But it happened again in 2001 when George W. Bush, a Republican, was in office. Sacramento Bee newspaper also found records indicating Bracamontes was back in the U.S. again in the early 2000s, still under President Bush. Bracamontes was arrested at least 3 times in Maricopa County, Arizona, on drug and weapons charges. That was the territory of then Sheriff Joe Arpaio, an outspoken supporter of President Trump. So much so, Arpaio was even pardoned by the president when the sheriff's racial profiling of immigrants ran afoul of the courts. The Bee and other sources found Bracamontes was deported twice and once released in those cases. Arpaio's assessment?
I don't know how many times he was arrested and slipped through the cracks. It's my gut feeling that it wasn't just 2 times he's been deported.
Still, the video goes further, suggesting scores of other immigrants could be just as threatening. Homeland Security has even said the caravan approaching the border is harboring more than 200 folks with criminal histories, while offering precious little proof and few details.
And that was Tom Foreman reporting. Arpaio said today that his officers likely contacted federal authorities to pick up Bracamontes because that was the procedure in the jails at the time.
Governor Jerry Brown made a rare appearance today on the campaign trail. He urged voters to vote no on Proposition 6. The governor gave a 90-second speech in a push to save a gas tax hike that he fought for. Prop 6 would repeal the gas tax and other vehicle fees that fund road and bridge repairs. Brown said the Republicans who are pushing for the proposition to pass, quote, don't have the best interest of California in mind.
Killing Proposition 6 is the right thing to do. It's a bad idea. It's dangerous. And it was cooked up by some shady politicians who used their campaign funds because they thought they could fool the people.
And Governor Brown is set to leave office in January. Republican candidate John Cox is hoping Prop 6 will bring conservatives who oppose the gas tax to the polls on Tuesday.
Breaking news, a gunman targeted a yoga studio in Florida tonight, killing 2 people and then taking his own life. Now, this happened in Tallahassee, and the mayor, who is running in a close race for governor, has left the campaign trail to deal with this tragedy. Here's correspondent Chris Martinez.
Chaos erupted Friday night at a busy shopping center in Tallahassee, Florida. Police say a gunman opened fire at a hot yoga studio before likely killing himself.
The gunman is deceased with a possible self-inflicted gunshot wound.
It was a very scary time. It was a shocking moment that something would happen like this.
Melissa Hutchinson was working at a nearby restaurant when some of the injured victims came in for help, including a man who tried to fight the shooter.
He had quite a few wounds on his face, I guess, from being trying to help him.
Tallahassee Mayor Andrew Gillum tweeted, "I'm deeply appreciative of law enforcement's quick response to the shooting. No act of gun violence is acceptable." He broke off from his campaign for governor to return to his city.
Although we were not releasing the identity of the gunman, we have tentatively ID'd the gunman, and we are working diligently to try to link a connection between him and any of the victims.
While police continue their investigation, they say there is no longer any threat to the public.
Chris Martinez, KCAL 9 News.
Holy sugar beans.
Up next, it came out of nowhere. A tornado touched down today in Florida. We'll have a report from the scene.
And developing tonight, Islamic militants attacked a group of Christians in Egypt. The death toll rising.
With all creation I sing, praise to the King of Kings.
And how strong is evangelical Christian support for President Trump? We'll check in with some of America's most religious voters.
Bernie Sanders endorses Prop 10, saying municipalities should have the freedom to deal with affordable housing and rising rents. Let's pass Prop 10. Join Bernie Sanders and vote yes on 10. Prop 10 is endorsed by Bernie Sanders, the California Democratic Party, the LA Times, and the League of Women Voters.
Proposition 8. Dangerous for kidney dialysis patients, costly for you. That's why every daily newspaper in California urges no on 8. The Sacramento Bee warns Prop 8 would put dialysis patients in jeopardy. The Los Angeles Times warns Prop 8 would make care more expensive. And healthcare groups agree. The California Medical Association opposes Prop 8. So does the American Nurses Association California and California's emergency room doctors. Join them in voting no on 8.
I support term limits.
30 years later, Dana Rohrabacher is still there, not listening to us. He voted 66 times to dismantle health care. He voted to gut protections for pre-existing conditions like asthma and cancer, and for an age tax that lets insurance companies make people over 50 pay more.
I support term limits.
30 years later, enough is enough. Independence USA PAC is responsible for the content of this advertising.
Bernie Sanders and everyone agrees.
We need affordable housing in California.
Proposition 10 does not impact homeowners.
But will provide much needed relief for rent.
Because the rent is too damn high.
Prop 10 is endorsed by the California Democratic Party, the LA Times, and the League of Women Voters.
It was all going so well until...
I've been wanting to get to you for a long time. Shucky ducky quack quack. Smells so good. I'm taking it all in.
What y'all laughing at? All new Family Feud.
Yeah, buddy.
I'm getting scared.
Weeknights at 6 and 6:30 on KCAL 9.
Developing tonight, the Islamic State is making good on a past threat to target Egypt's Coptic Christians.
Gunmen today started shooting on a bus carrying pilgrims to a remote desert monastery, killing 7 people. That death toll is expected to rise. The bus was attacked in an area just south of the capital, Cairo. All but 1 of the 7 people killed were members of the same family. 12 other people were seriously hurt. Egyptian Christians represent about 10% of the country's 100 million people.
Well, now to a frightening situation in Florida late this afternoon. Several storms, including multiple tornadoes, tore through the Tampa Bay area this afternoon. Correspondent Manuel Bojorquez is there.
Holy sugar beans.
Cell phone video captured the late afternoon tornado as it ripped through Seminole, Florida. At least 3 tornadoes touched down in the Tampa area. This one crossed the street in Spring Hill. The line of heavy rain and wind uprooted trees, knocked down power lines, and caused major damage to several homes and businesses.
The storm really hit us pretty quick.
Seminole Assistant Fire Chief William Morelli.
There's no injuries. Everyone's safe. We have cleared all the buildings that have damage.
For several hours, at least 5 counties were under a tornado warning. After the storm, road crews started clearing streets blocked by fallen trees. Some neighbors were shocked by the damage.
My wife called me. She said, "Come home now." Tornado, that's all she said.
Chuck DeMarco says he was at the supermarket during the storm. He received a panic call from his wife.
I was praying that I would find my house. So we were spared.
Emergency crews spent Friday night surveying damage, and at one point more than 50,000 people were without power. The good news is the National Weather Service has given this area the all clear from more potentially severe storms. Manuel Bojorquez, CBS News, Pinellas Park, Florida.
Evelyn Tapp joins us now with a look at what's going on in Florida. Evelyn.
Yeah, Crystal and Juan, as we get a look at satellite, you'll see the brunt of the storm is moving up, but the damage they caused, we were just showing you, pretty incredible. Multiple tornadoes touching down through Florida and still dealing with severe thunderstorms coming through right now, but things are really going to start to calm down for us as we move into the next 24 hours. So that's the good news there. As we get a look at our forecast here at home, we're actually tracking a brush fire in San Antonio Heights. As we get a look at current conditions, wind speeds are calm. That's good news. Relative humidity is up and temperatures are down. So as far as the firefight's concerned, we are looking at favorable conditions. Again, wind-wise, calm. And as we get a look at your futurecast wind gusts here, you'll see gusts picking up on and off throughout the weekend. We're looking at below advisory level winds, but the breeze will still be there and offshore conditions will remain through Sunday. So with that, we'll continue to stay warm and dry through the end of the weekend. Temperatures this evening in the 60s and 70s, relative humidity up in the double digits, and temperatures earlier today today. 88 degrees for downtown with the average being 76. So we were well above average for this time of year. Tonight we're down to the 60s. Tomorrow we are up to the 80s, 84 degrees with plenty of sunshine. So your futurecast showing you high pressure holding strong tonight. That's going to continue to build over the weekend. And with that, temperatures staying warm, but things change as we head into next week, just slightly. We get a little cooler. And with that, let's get a look at your forecast for the beaches, the basin, and the valleys. We are looking at 70s, 80s, and remember, Saturday night into Sunday, we set those clocks back an hour. It is fall back. We gain an hour of sleep. Our phones generally do the job for us, but our microwaves and, you know, our non-cell phone clocks do still need to be changed. So just a reminder for everybody, this continues through Monday, and then we start to see temperatures get a little cooler as we head into Tuesday, Wednesday, and even Thursday and Friday of next week, but still 60s and 70s on tap. Crystal, Juan, back to you.
Hardline Iranians are chanting against America as President Donald Trump prepares to impose tough new sanctions. We'll have a report from Tehran.
And President Trump loses a round in his legal battle in a case that could dig into his finances. We'll explain the claims coming up.
The Surf Report on KCAL 9 is sponsored by your Southern California Chevy dealers.
And as we get a look at your KCAL 9 surf report, you will see surf 2 to 4 feet. Water temperature 68 degrees. High tide early tomorrow morning at 6:01 a.m. Low tide 10:52 p.m. That's tonight. And that is your surf report.
The Surf Report on KCAL 9 is sponsored by your Southern California Chevy dealers.
If you're worried about retirement, here's what you need to know about Congressman Steve Knight.
I think that Social Security was a bad idea. I do. I absolutely think it was a bad idea.
That's right. Steve Knight thinks Social Security is a bad idea. And Knight voted to let insurance companies charge people over 50 5 times more for health care. Steve Knight, wrong on Social Security, wrong for us. Independence USA PAC is responsible for the content of this advertising.
Talk, read, sing.
Watch their little brains grow.
It changes everything.
Talk with your baby. Laugh and play. Tell them something new every day.
Go to first5california.com.
Nearly 200 bridges and overpasses in the LA region are structurally deficient and unsafe. But Prop 6 attacks the safety of local roads and bridges, threatening safety repairs to more than 650 miles of local roads, freeways, and bridges. Prop 6 eliminates $6.3 billion in transportation funding dedicated to the LA region. And Prop 6 kills traffic relief projects already underway. It's why first responders, earthquake experts, and local leaders say no on 6.
California has 2 candidates for superintendent with 2 very different records. Politician Tony Thurmond failed as a school board member, sued by the ACLU for leaving at-risk students in rotting, unsafe trailers, reprimanded by the Obama administration for failing to stop widespread sexual harassment of students. Education leader Marshall Tuck improved schools he led, raising graduation rates 60%. For school safety and school improvement, only Marshall Tuck has done it.
You've worked hard to get more out of life. Shouldn't you get more out of your Medicare Advantage plan? With Blue Shield of California, you will get more of the things that matter most, but you only have a limited time to upgrade your coverage. So call 888-542-4880 today. So what does more mean for you? It means more value with $0 premiums and prescription drug coverage, more savings with $0 copays for doctor and specialist visits. And it means more coverage with vision, dental, hearing aids, and other benefits like a medical alert device. You don't settle when it comes to getting the most out of life. So get more with a Medicare Advantage plan built around you from Blue Shield of California. Hurry before the 2019 annual enrollment period ends. Call 888-542-4880. That's 888-542-4880 to learn more or enroll today.
Twitter is dealing with election meddling. The social media giant has deleted more than 10,000 fake accounts that posted messages discouraging voting. Some recent tweets urged Democratic men to refrain from voting, arguing their voices would drown out that of Democratic women voters. The company says the accounts were all automated and wrongly appeared to be from Democrats. The Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee helped flag the accounts.
California has just set a record for the number of people registered to vote. 19.6 million people. That's nearly 2 million more than 2014, and the most registered voters in state history. Nearly 80% of eligible voters in California are now registered. That's the highest percentage since the 50s. Secretary of State Alex Padilla calls it nearly unprecedented to set registration records in a midterm election. If you haven't registered yet, it is not too late to do it in person.
And coming up in campaign 2018, the bitter race for the U.S. Senate in Texas is getting more heated. We'll have an update on this very close race.
Why did you send him money? This is a person you had never met in person.
I don't know. I'm a caregiver. I've always taken care of people.
And a woman breaks her silence about being catfished online into sending money to a stranger. She wants you to know her story so you can protect yourself.
And Clayton Kershaw will remain with the Dodgers. Lisa Hillary has the details next in sports.
Hi, this is Vin Scully for California's Children's Hospitals. Specialized care, no matter what a family can pay. 85% of kids with leukemia cured. Yes for Children's Hospitals. Yes on Proposition 4.
California has two candidates for superintendent with two very different records. Politician Tony Thurmond failed as a school board member, sued by the ACLU for leaving at-risk students in rotting, unsafe trailers, reprimanded by the Obama administration for failing to stop widespread sexual harassment of students. Education leader Marshall Tuck improved schools he led, raising graduation rates 60%. For school safety and school improvement, only Marshall Tuck has done it.
I support term limits.
30 years later, Dana Rohrabacher is still there, not listening to us. He voted 66 times to dismantle health care. He voted to gut protections for pre-existing conditions like asthma and cancer, and for an age tax that lets insurance companies make people over 50 pay more.
I support term limits.
30 years later, enough is enough. Independence USA PAC is responsible for the content of this advertising.
Dr. Shirota created Yakult probiotic drink over 80 years ago. Wow, there are so many choices.
Which ones are probiotics?
Which ones are non-fat?
How about the product with Lactobacillus casei Shirota? Yakult contains the probiotic strain Lactobacillus casei Shirota. Enjoy Yakult with your family.
California's Children's Hospitals. Specialized care, no matter what a family can pay. 85% of kids with leukemia cured. Yes for Children's Hospitals. Yes on 4. Building to cure more.
And welcome back. I'm Lisa Hillary with sports. Ace Clayton Kershaw has decided to stay put. The three-time NL Cy Young Award winner agreed to a 3-year deal worth $93 million with incentives. Kershaw confident they can get back to a 3rd World Series.
Boston, I think, definitely was better than us this year. And Houston was better than us the year before. And we took them to 7 games and definitely had probably much more of a better opportunity last year. I can't pinpoint something that we need to do to get better, but I know Andrew Farhan, all those guys will do everything they can to be right back where we're at this past couple of years.
After a 3-5 start to the season, Lakers coach Luke Walton was reportedly reprimanded by team president Magic Johnson this past Tuesday. Following today's practice, Walton spoke with the media and would not go into much detail about that meeting with Magic.
Magic, myself, Rob, Jeannie, we are in constant communication, so this is no new, like, oh, all of a sudden there's an emergency meeting. This is something we do all the time. What we discuss in our meetings is between us.
Politically correct. Clippers in a better place as they look for their 5th win of the season tonight in Orlando. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander turning defense into offense in the second. The rookie gets the steal, goes behind the back and lays it in. The Clippers led by 13 at the break. Coming off a double-double yesterday, Boban Marjanovic started for the first time. The big man did it again, finishing with 11 points and 10 boards. Clippers, they win 120-95. And that's going to do it for sports. So much more on these stories coming up on Sports Central at 10:45. I'll see you then.
With all creation I sing, praise to the King of Kings.
And how strong is evangelical Christian support for President Trump? We'll hear directly from religious voters next.
And the man best known recently for playing President Trump faces an assault charge tonight, a confrontation that landed Alec Baldwin in trouble with the law again.
Plus, a woman who missed a stop started attacking the bus driver. It ended in a tragedy that shocked China.
And be sure to switch it over to CBS 2 tonight at 11. Songs, blogs, even a ballot measure. The growing battle to abolish daylight saving time, just as we prepare to turn the clocks back this weekend.
For the connected moments that matter most, you want the best, and Spectrum delivers. Starting with Spectrum TV, with stunning HD and thousands of titles free on demand. Call 833-213-8998. Then get Spectrum Internet with game-changing speeds starting at 100 megabits plus a free modem. Switch to Spectrum TV and Internet today from $89.98 a month. Call 833-213-8998. And introducing a new way to stay connected on the go, Spectrum Mobile. America's largest, most reliable LTE network, combined with our nationwide Wi-Fi network. Get it now with free talk and text with our unlimited data plan for $45 a line, or our buy the gig plan for $14 a gig. Switch today and save up to 40% on your mobile bill. The best network, the best devices, the best value. Get Spectrum TV and Internet from $89.98 a month, and Spectrum Mobile with our unlimited data plan for $45 a line, all with no contracts. Call 833-213-8998.
Have something to share? We want to see it. Hashtag CBSLA. Got a great photo or video? We may use your post on air or online. Hashtag CBSLA.
I support term limits.
30 years later, Dana Rohrabacher is still there, not listening to us. He voted 66 times to dismantle health care. He voted to gut protections for pre-existing conditions like asthma and cancer. And for an age tax that lets insurance companies make people over 50 pay more.
I support term limits.
30 years later, enough is enough. Independence USA PAC is responsible for the content of this advertising.
Live from the Broadcast Center in Los Angeles, this is KCAL 9 News at 9.
Welcome back. I'm Juan Fernandez.
And I'm Crystal Cruz. 4 days away from the midterms, President Trump has been campaigning hard, urging on his supporters, some of the most devoted of whom are evangelical Christians.
Chris Buckler has been to Mississippi looking at the influence religion will have on the upcoming election.
Across the United States, religion and politics feel part of the same conversation.
Join us for the next hour as we offer a Christian response to the issues of the day.
Christian talk radio stations here don't shy away from the topics that can cause such division in this country. Often, they appear to embrace them.
They say we should have an open border at the south side of our country, the southern border, but they live in gated communities.
Right. That's right. Mississippi is said to be the most religious state in the U.S. Here at Ole Miss University in Oxford, there are several active Christian groups, and evangelicals are among the Republican Party and Donald Trump's most devoted supporters.
That I can share with others that can help us.
At the Ole Miss Baptist Student Union, there were many who recognized the president's flaws, but his hardline views on one issue mattered more than any other: abortion.
It plays a huge role in every political decision I make, just because I think that human life at its core is that valuable.
I think there were a significant number of Christian and evangelical voters that basically held their nose as they voted for President Trump because the stench of his moral life. But they realized that out of the two, there wasn't necessarily a good option, so they went with the person who represented their values in their policies more than the person who lived it out in their personal life.
With all creation I sing, praise to the King.
In the Calvary Baptist Church in Wisconsin, you'll find people keen to show their deep beliefs, both in God and in conservative values.
Because I'm overwhelmed by the love that God has for me, I'm going to reach out to the community around me and everyone that I bump shoulders with on a daily basis. but I believe that my conservative view is also tied into that. I don't think that you can separate the two.
This is much more than a best-selling book.
The Republican Party is a natural home for many of the views held by this congregation. But that means they need to put their faith in President Trump, a man whose lies and alleged affairs suggest a life less than godly.
I think that can probably be said of every politician, and I don't know that he's a politician, but we're all sinners saved by grace. And so if he can recognize that and get advice from other people and surround himself with wise people, then I would be comforted in that.
You get the impression that some Christians are having to find forgiveness in order to praise Donald Trump. But the president and his Republican Party know that in evangelicals, they have found something of a political rock. Chris Buckler, BBC News, Oxford, Mississippi.
A voter ID requirement imposed by Native American groups in North Dakota will stand. A federal judge today refused to temporarily exempt Native American voters in that state from being required to show a valid ID with an address when voting. The judge said it was too close to Election Day to make any changes. Incumbent Democratic Senator Heidi Heitkamp is locked in a high-profile race with Republican challenger Kevin Cramer in North Dakota. Native American support helped propel her to office 6 years ago.
President Trump's financial records could come under scrutiny amid lawsuits accusing him of violating the Constitution's emoluments clause. The Trump International Hotel in Washington, D.C. is at the center of the fight. A federal judge today denied a Justice Department request to stop all legal proceedings. Several lawsuits argue having foreign representatives spend money at the hotel violates a constitutional ban on federal officials receiving such benefits without congressional approval. Once the case is moved to the discovery phase, financial records like the president's income tax returns could become available to attorneys.
Another legal setback for the Trump administration. A trial over a decision to add a citizenship question to the 2020 census will proceed. Today, the U.S. Supreme Court justices rejected an administration request to postpone the trial. The administration says the question will help the Justice Department better enforce the Voting Rights Act. Critics say the question will discourage immigrants from participating in the census, effectively cutting off federal dollars to states that tend to vote Democratic. The trial begins Monday in New York.
And another brush with the law. Actor Alec Baldwin was arrested after allegedly attacking someone over a parking spot. Correspondent Jerika Duncan has the details.
60-year-old Alec Baldwin walked out of a New York City precinct today after being charged with assault and harassment. The Emmy Award-winning actor allegedly hit a 49-year-old man in Manhattan in a dispute over a parking spot. Reports say both men pushed each other and Baldwin hit the man on the left side of his face.
You guys gotta get out of the middle.
Baldwin is no stranger to controversy. In 2011, Baldwin was kicked off a plane after refusing to turn off his phone. The actor said then he was playing words with friends. In 2012, Baldwin allegedly punched a Daily News photographer. A year later, he was suspended from his MSNBC talk show for using an anti-gay slur. Since 2016, Baldwin has had success on NBC's Saturday Night Live with a recurring role impersonating the president.
I've heard jail's fun. Fun? Yeah, it's like camp.
The president, who has fired back at the show and Baldwin on Twitter, commented today on the news that Baldwin was arrested.
I wish him luck.
That was Jerika Duncan reporting. Both the assault and harassment charges are misdemeanors. The actor is back in court at the end of the month.
Hardline Iranians are chanting against America as President Trump prepares to impose tough new sanctions. Just ahead, we'll have a report from Tehran.
Why did you send him money? This is a person you had never met in person.
I don't know. I'm a caregiver. I've always taken care of people.
A woman breaks her silence about being catfished online into sending money to a stranger. She wants you to know her story so you can protect yourself.
Proposition 11 solves two issues. First, it continues to pay paramedics while we're on break. Second, It ensures the closest ambulance can respond if you call 911. Vote yes on 11. In an emergency, minutes matter.
Covered California. It's more than just health care. It's life care.
I'm Harley Ruda, and I spent my career in business, not politics. But I'm tired of career politicians like Dana Rohrabacher who serve themselves instead of taxpayers like us. Unlike him, I'll take on the big drug companies to reduce prices, protect people with pre-existing conditions, and protect the Social Security and Medicare benefits we've earned. I'm not taking any money from corporate PACs because I won't work for them. I'll work for you. I'm Harley Ruda, and I approve this message.
If you're worried about retirement, here's what you need to know about Congressman Steve Knight.
I think that Social Security was a bad idea. I do. I absolutely think it was a bad idea.
That's right. Steve Knight thinks Social Security is a bad idea. And Knight voted to let insurance companies charge people over 50 5 times more for health care. Steve Knight, wrong on Social Security, wrong for us. Independence USA PAC is responsible for the content of this advertising.
Measure W is a local parcel tax to modernize LA County's outdated water system. The money raised by Measure W would be used to capture and store billions of gallons of water we waste each year. Measure W would clean the plastic, trash, and toxins from our waterways, beaches, and ocean. Learn more about Measure W, the Safe Clean Water program at safecleanwaterla.org.
California's newspapers recommend yes on 11. A vote for Proposition 11 is a sensible vote for public safety. It ensures the closest ambulance remains on call during paid breaks so that they can respond immediately when needed. Vote yes on 11.
And we are getting a look outside right now at Long Beach in downtown. You will see temperatures are mild this evening. And as we get a look at the rest of our forecast for the weekend and next week, well, temperatures are going to be staying warm. So let's get a look at conditions right now on radar. And you will see a little bit of cloud cover out there. But overall, we're going to see plenty of sunshine this weekend and warm numbers all around. I do want to get a look at San Antonio Heights. We've been tracking a brush fire in the area. Fortunately, wind speeds are very calm right now. Temperatures are cool as well, and as we get a look at wind gusts, you'll see just that. As we get a look at peak wind gusts over the next few hours and the next few days, we'll continue to see some wind come through, some gusts come through, but overall it will be below advisory level. So that's the good news for us, but still offshore winds predominant through at least Sunday, so that's going to keep us warm, dry, and slightly windy as well. Temperatures this evening in the 60s and 70s, and as we get a look at relative humidity, we're in the double digits, so that's good news for us as far as the brush fire is concerned, of course, as well. 88 earlier today downtown, with average being 76, so we were well above average for this time of year. And as we get a look at my extended forecast for the beaches, the basin, and the valleys, you'll see numbers in the 70s and the 80s over the next couple of days, even hitting 90 degrees tomorrow for the valley, so very warm. Setting those clocks back an hour Saturday night into Sunday. So just a reminder, we gain an hour of sleep. So don't worry, don't be scared. It's a good thing, right, for most of us. And then as we head into Monday, we're going to continue to stay warm. Temperatures getting slightly cooler and a little cloudier later in the week, with the same pattern holding for the Inland Empire, the high desert, and the mountains. Juan and Crystal, back to you guys.
Okay, thank you, Evelyn. And it's been more than a year since the Oroville Dam in Northern California nearly failed, prompting an evacuation of 3 counties. Now, as repairs continue, the federal government has a warning for the state.
And a woman who missed a stop started attacking a bus driver. In the end, a tragedy that has shocked China. We'll have a report from China after the break.
If you have a car, you could get cash. With a Speedy Cash Express title loan, you get more cash, from $2,600 to $5,000, and no clear title needed. Apply for a Speedy Cash Express title loan today and unlock more cash.
Love that Speedy Cash.
Mimi Walters and Donald Trump turned their backs on Orange County.
The Walters Trump tax plan gives away trillions to big corporations and Washington special interests, adds trillions more to the national debt, and threatens deep cuts to Medicare and Social Security. And Walters and Trump raise taxes on Orange County families to pay for it. Mimi Walters and Donald Trump. Wrong for Orange County.
I'm Katie Porter, and I approve this message.
Dialysis is a godsend for me. It is my ability to continue being with my family. If Prop 8 passes, thousands of us dialysis patients will be thrown out into the cold. My clinic will close, and my life will be at risk. I think it's totally criminal that they have endangered every one of our lives. If the voters want to be heroes, they can save 1,000 lives by just circling no on Prop 8.
If you're worried about retirement, here's what you need to know about Congressman Steve Knight.
I think that Social Security was a bad idea. I do. I absolutely think it was a bad idea.
That's right. Steve Knight thinks Social Security is a bad idea. And Knight voted to let insurance companies charge people over 50 5 times more for health care. Steve Knight, wrong on Social Security, wrong for us. Independence USA PAC is responsible for the content of this advertising.
Short on cash? You could get this much with a typical payday loan, or you could get 10 times more with an express installment loan, up to $5,000. Get 10 times more cash with a Speedy Cash express installment loan.
Love that Speedy Cash.
Minutes away at 10, teachers in trouble, how they're defending their decision to wear these costumes for Halloween.
Also, Fright Night fun becomes real-life horror. Passengers in a panic when their shuttle driver steers way off course.
And walking his dog 1 minute, a hero the next. A Good Samaritan pulls a woman from her burning car. That's tonight at 10.
Now at 9, a second round of U.S. sanctions go into effect Monday in Iran. It aims to halt all Iran's oil exports and other sectors.
The Trump administration is trying to force Iran into submission. As correspondent Fred Pleitgen reports, Tehran remains defiant.
The usual chants against America, more forceful than usual, during hardline Friday prayers in Tehran. A Revolutionary Guard general ripping into the U.S. We are encountering a real fight with our main enemy, America, he says, and they're using all the resources they have and organizing a battle against us. As the U.S. is set to hit Iran with new crippling sanctions, defiance from religious conservatives.
I think these kind of sanctions make us more powerful for the future. And I think this is an opportunity.
So far, Iran's rulers not buckling under U.S. pressure.
If it was the Trump administration's intention to try and weaken the Iranian government, that certainly doesn't seem to be happening. In fact, it seems as though many Iranians are uniting behind the power structure of clergy, military, and their government in anger over Washington's policies.
President Trump has already hit Iran with a flurry of sanctions.
We are doing a big number on Iran,
sending Iran's economy and its currency into a tailspin. Now, the U.S. will target Iran's important oil and gas sector, potentially a crushing blow to Iran's finances, causing concerns in this moderate area. The economy has started getting worse and worse, this woman says, and everyday items are 3 to 4 times more expensive than before. And some even calling for talks with D.C. We need real negotiations that both governments would be committed to, this woman says, and they shouldn't leave the table again. Defiance, anger, but also deep concern as Iran's people once again brace for more economic hardship. Fred Pleitgen, CNN, Tehran.
The mystery surrounding the death of 2 Saudi sisters in New York City is deepening tonight. Police now say there were no signs of either woman being assaulted. Their bodies washed up on New York City's waterfront last week. Authorities say 16-year-old Tala Faria and 23-year-old Rotana Faria were bound together with duct tape. The 2 had traveled from Virginia. They reportedly told people that they rather harm themselves than return to Saudi Arabia.
Now to China, where a fight between a bus driver and one of his passengers triggered disastrous consequences. Security camera video showed the driver being punched by a woman when he refused to stop the bus. Correspondent Stephen McDonald reports from Beijing.
A passenger fighting with a driver in southwestern China has led to a tragic accident, with all on board thought to have been killed. She became angry when he wouldn't stop and started attacking him, hitting the driver in the head with her phone. The bus swerved, struck an oncoming car, burst through a guardrail and plunged into the Yangtze River. There were 15 people on the bus, including the driver. 13 bodies have been recovered, but there are not expected to be any survivors. The Yangtze's powerful currents and poor visibility have hampered efforts by diving teams to find the last 2 passengers. Police in Chongqing, investigating the incident from last Sunday, released video footage from the black box recorder. It has shocked people in China who, while used to seeing outbursts in public, are not accustomed to them leading to such a terrible result. Stephen McDonald, BBC News, Beijing.
A North Carolina woman is in jail accused of plotting to kill her mother for insurance money. She apparently needed the money because she herself was the victim of a catfishing scheme. Here's correspondent Meg Oliver.
The online romance started in January when 65-year-old Roxanne Reed fell for someone she met on Facebook who called themselves Scott Humple. Reed claims the scammer started asking for money to pay medical bills. Even though they never met in person, she sent the stranger more than $50,000 over 7 months.
We were able to get hold of some text messages that obviously led to the charge that we're looking at today.
But when family members finally reported the scam, investigators alleged that Reed, now out of money, had been plotting to kill her 88-year-old mother. She's now been charged with several counts of fraud and conspiracy to commit murder with the fake Scott Humple.
Have you ever been in a relationship with Roxanne Reed?
No.
The real Scott Humple lives over 1,200 miles away in Corpus Christi, Texas. 7 years ago, Humple's wife died in a plane crash. Soon after, he started receiving suspicious messages on Facebook.
It just seemed odd because I didn't know them. So I sent a message back and say, "Do I know you?" And then they'd say, "Yes, I've been conversing with you on Christian Mingle or on Match.com or something for months."
Humple discovered scammers had created multiple profiles under his name.
How many women do you think have fallen for fake Scott Humples in catfishing scams?
Hundreds.
Adam Levin is the founder of CyberScout and an expert in identity theft. He says Humple checked off all the boxes for a catfisher, a handsome, well-to-do widower.
How would you describe these catfishing fraudsters?
They're emotional terrorists.
Emotional terrorists.
They don't care who they destroy, how they destroy them, whatever. All they want is they want money.
We reached out to several social media sites. Facebook said it advises users not to accept suspicious requests, while Match.com said it asks users to never send money or share financial information. Levin says that while catfishing has become more sophisticated, the red flags are always there.
Well, the red flag here is that the grammar is horrendous. The spelling is not great at all.
But for catfishing victims like 73-year-old Beverly Fransky, those red flags are often missed.
Why did you go on Match.com?
Just maybe to find somebody to talk to.
The retired nursing assistant lives in Golden Valley, Arizona. She fell for a man claiming to be a 61-year-old serviceman who told her he was stationed in Afghanistan.
Oh, he just looked like a nerd.
He looked like a nerd.
Yeah,
someone you could trust.
Yes.
The catfisher sent Beverly a copy of his fake passport. He only signed his first name and was wearing a hat. Even still, Beverly believed him.
He was just real polite and said he had a son and that his wife had died 5 years ago.
Beverly sent the stranger more than $30,000. The scammer asked for money to pay his sick child's medical bills. She drained her inheritance and borrowed $10,000 from friends.
Why did you send him money? This was a person you had never met in person.
I don't know. I'm a caregiver. I've always taken care of people. And it was one promise after another, I'll pay you back when I get home and oh, blah, blah, blah.
Are you embarrassed that this happened?
No.
How do you feel?
Disgusted.
Disgusted.
And mad. And hurt. In a way, hurt. I'm not embarrassed, no. Because nobody should be embarrassed for trying to help somebody.
That was Meg Oliver reporting. Beverly calls it an expensive education As for Roxanne Reed, the district attorney is still determining how to proceed in a case where the accused is both a suspect and a victim.
Next at 9, the bitter race for the U.S. Senate in Texas is getting more heated. We'll have an update on this very close race.
Then at 10, we continue to follow breaking news of brush fire burning tonight in the Angeles National Forest. Crews up against hot and dry conditions. We're live with the firefight.
Classroom chaos. A teacher caught on camera pummeling a student. Find out the teacher's fate tonight.
Family friends identify the couple who lost their lives in a suspicious house fire in Diamond Bar this morning. And tonight, detectives are still trying to question one of their family members.
As always, our first question goes to Jim Hill.
That's him.
My guy was Jim Hill.
But Jim, you know, you're a legend in LA sports.
That's a heck of a statement to make.
Jimmy Hill.
Thank you, Jimmy. Every year's different, Jim. You got it like that?
If you're worried about retirement, here's what you need to know about Congressman Steve Knight.
I think that Social Security was a bad idea. I do. I absolutely think it was a bad idea.
That's right. Steve Knight thinks Social Security is a bad idea. And Knight voted to let insurance companies charge people over 50 5 times more for health care. Steve Knight, wrong on Social Security, wrong for us. Independence USA PAC is responsible for the content of this advertising.
California has 2 candidates for superintendent with 2 very different records. Politician Tony Thurmond failed as a school board member, sued by the ACLU for leaving at-risk students in rotting, unsafe trailers, reprimanded by the Obama administration for failing to stop widespread sexual harassment of students. Education leader Marshall Tuck improved schools he led, raising graduation rates 60%. For school safety and school improvement, only Marshall Tuck has done it.
Life can be wild and unpredictable. It's good to know HealthNet has you covered. HealthNet has provided affordable health coverage your neighbors and their families have relied on for more than 30 years. And we're looking forward to the future because we are your HealthNet. Ask about HealthNet's no-cost Medi-Cal plan with dental care in LA County. Call 844-HealthNet today or visit healthnet.com.
Okay, everyone, our mission is to provide complete balanced nutrition for strength and energy.
Great tasting Ensure with 9 grams of protein and 26 vitamins and minerals. Ensure, now up to 30 grams of protein for strength and energy.
New concerns tonight about the recently rebuilt Oroville Dam.
Federal officials warn it may not be strong enough. The dam's flood control spillways were rebuilt after nearly 200,000 people were forced to evacuate last year when Lake Oroville overflowed. According to the Sacramento Bee, federal regulators warn the renovated spillways likely cannot handle a mega flood. They say a mega flood likely won't happen, but we should be ready for it. State officials say the costly repairs have made the dam's spillways stronger than ever. Lake Oroville is a major source of drinking water for Southern California and is the state's largest reservoir.
Well, it's going to be a close race in Texas. Senator Ted Cruz is fighting to keep his seat. He even had his former rival, President Trump, fly out to campaign for him.
Some polls show the Republican in the lead, while others have Democratic Congressman Beto O'Rourke ahead. Correspondent Omar Villafranca is there.
Republican Senator Ted Cruz is fighting for his reliably red seat. In Fort Worth, Cruz is focusing on immigration and jobs to hang on to a slim lead in the polls.
Republicans have dominated Texas politics for more than 20 years. Democrats have not won a U.S. Senate seat in Texas since 1988. But Beto O'Rourke is hoping to change that by appealing to young and suburban voters. And when it comes to campaign cash, he's already outraised Ted Cruz by a margin of 2-1.
While Democrats are hoping that O'Rourke can pick up a seat in this Republican stronghold, they're defending seats in 5 red states that went heavily for Trump in 2016.
If you have not voted, you vote today.
Making the Democrats' uphill climb to retake the Senate even steeper.
It is nonstop campaigning for the candidates from here on out. In fact, Beto O'Rourke is about to have his 6th campaign rally of the day behind me. The early voting numbers in Texas are up significantly. In fact, data that was compiled by the Texas Tribune shows that in the biggest 30 counties in the state, early voting totals have already surpassed the last midterm's total number of votes cast. Omar Villafranca, CBS News, Dallas.
Thanks for watching KCAL 9 News at 9.
KCAL 9 News at 10 starts right now.
Live from the Broadcast Center in Los Angeles, this is KCAL 9 News at 10.
A teacher gets into a band room brawl with a student. It was caught on video at Maywood Academy High School.
KCAL 9's Tom Wade is live tonight in Maywood with details and reaction. Tom.
And Susie and Jeff, tonight this video is sending shockwaves, not just through this campus, but through the district. And tonight we are learning more about what led up to this horrible fight. A teacher decks a student, and the two go at each other in a horribly disturbing fistfight. All of this unfolding in band class in front of a room full of mortified students, some of them recording this stunning scene with their phones. The beating is nonstop, with the teacher wailing on the student, even using an object, maybe his phone, to pummel the kid to the ground. Students and an adult try to pull the student away, but the teacher is relentless. The student cannot escape.
I was just scared for the kid and probably for the teacher too.
These two students were in the room when all of this went down. They spoke to us with their parents' permission. They, along with other students, say the fight began with the teacher telling the student he was not wearing the proper school uniform. The student responded with a tirade of racist profanity. Those words can be heard here on the video before the fight, but they're so offensive we are not airing it.
It was just like back and forth, and then that's when the teacher just decided to throw a punch, and then that's when everything happened.
Students identify the teacher as Marston Riley. At his Orange County home tonight, his wife told our Stacy Butler she had not spoken with her husband.
I don't know anything. I don't even know what happened.
The fallout from the video is just beginning. Parents are furious.
I'm shocked. But why did it have to escalate to this point, though?
I think something needs to be done. That's way out of hand.
The district has not released a statement. They say this is a personnel matter. For the fire department, they say they did transfer one person, possibly the student, from the school to the hospital. As for the teacher, he is being held on a $50,000 bond at the LA County Jail. Reporting live in Maywood, I'm Tom Wade, KCAL 9 News.
Tom, thank you.